you're a former FBI agent. You infiltrated white supremacist groups in the 1990s. And I'm just curious about your experience with that. Obviously, scary work. But how would you say your work, from your perspective, fits into the Bureau's broader history of racism, like in terms of targeting civil rights activists, and frankly, that's ongoing, honestly, with Black Lives Matter as well. What is your perspective on how your work fits into that larger picture analysis?
So it actually, I think, was reflective of what was going on and still going on. People assume that because the case was successful that it was supported right from the very beginning. But that actually wasn't true. It was really only in both of my undercover cases targeting the white supremacists and far-right groups, there was a lot of resistance in management and at headquarters to those cases. And it was only because there were really very effective case agents who did the work to gather the evidence and had the administrative skills to get over every obstacle that those cases were actually approved. And frankly, it was made more dangerous because there were a lot of administrative obstacles that were being thrown in front of us that we had to overcome as I'm working directly with these dangerous individuals. So we were successful. And if you look through the history of the FBI, you'll find cases where similarly effective agents were able to go out and make cases. Even today, there are some good cases you could point to. The investigations against a white supremacist group called the Base, where the FBI can be effective. They have the tools, but it's just not prioritized. So if somebody wants to investigate environmentalists, they don't need to have a lot of evidence suggesting that there's some crime going on. They're given a green light and, in fact, given a national scope in their investigation, where, even in our investigations, even after they became successful and we worked our way into the people who were trafficking in illegal arms, we were constantly being told, stick to your region, the jurisdiction of the field office,
and is your
failing to recognize
go on,
that these are national groups.
That
these groups operate on a national and even international basis. So working them like a local police department would isn't the most effective methodology.
Yeah, and I am curious too, like you must have seen what some of your colleagues were able to do when they were, doing work that wasn't combating white supremacy. Like, were you surprised, or was the contrast in the resources and the support that you were given incredibly stark when you looked at the work that other people in your field were doing?
Definitely. And, the first case that I worked in 1992 targeting neo-Nazi skinhead groups in Los Angeles, it was my first undercover operation. So I didn't really know what to expect, and therefore wasn't terribly surprised by bureaucratic obstacles. As everybody in the FBI used to say, bureaucracy is our middle name. and all cases have those problems, but it was really only in talking to other undercover agents, particularly agents working drugs, where there was just flush with money and authorities, and nobody blinked at traveling around the world. I recognized it was contrast, but I figured as a program, the domestic terrorism program was learning how to do an operation like that. So it was expected that they would be a little cautious in how they went about it, and miserly with using resources to avoid criticism. But then when I continued working undercover cases and continued to see the same kind of bureaucratic resistance, I recognized that this was a deeper problem.
And is that really what motivated you to leave the FBI and speak about this more publicly?
So it really came down to a case, a post 9/11 case, where, again, when 9/11 happened, we all recognized the horror of it, but I was hopeful that the silver lining would be that there would be recognition that the counterterrorism program is mismanaged and needs to be revamped and headed in a completely different direction. But instead, what the FBI management decided to do is pretend it was a matter of limits on their intelligence collection, so taking those limits off. But if the problem is mismanagement of information and misunderstanding of information, having more information doesn't solve that problem. It makes it worse. And I became involved in a case that actually involved international terrorists and reaching out to white supremacist terrorists here in the United States, seeking to get some support from them. And the case, like my other two cases, was seriously mismanaged in the initiation. And at the time, the director, Robert Mueller, after some criticism of the FBI's handling of the 9/11 intelligence, said, well, if there's any agents out there that see a counterterrorism case being mismanaged, call headquarters. So I did. They didn't really want you to call headquarters.
Right.
And I was told I would never work undercover again, and then kind of put on the shelf, and realized after 2 years of trying to turn it around that my ability to work on effective cases at the FBI had ended, and it was time for me to find another way to talk about these issues.
I mean, that's well, we're grateful, because then we get to talk to you and pick your brain about some of the things that we don't see behind the scenes, but we only read about, obviously. And your personal account is super consistent with what we've heard and seen in terms of resource allocation within the FBI.